Hello, my name is Abigail,
My name is Kalliopi.
and welcome back to this month's episode of Life as an Olympic Equestrian. Today, we will be talking to Sam about her experience at the 2008 Beijing Olympics, as well as her career as a horse trainer.
Well, hello, my name is Samantha St. Jacques, and I am a horse trainer and a coach. And my job is to train horses for national and international level competition and train people how to work with those horses. So sometimes I train just with the horse. Sometimes I train just with a person and I never ride that horse. They ride the horse and I coach them. And sometimes it's a combination of both, where I will ride the horse and train it. And then I will also coach someone else on the horse and help them learn how to better ride it. And my role as a trainer and a coach goes into all aspects of teaching the rider how to better ride their horse, teaching the horse how to better do its job. And then there's also a mental component as well, teaching the rider how to prepare themselves mentally to be the best athlete in a competitive environment.
Awesome. What was the road to international competition like? Were you always into horseback riding? When did you start?
I started very young. I started asking my parents if I could ride pretty much as soon as I could talk, and learned that riding horses was a thing. And then I started riding lessons at a local riding school at age 5, and just did once a week riding lessons for quite a long time. I grew up in a suburban environment, is where my parents lived and my family lived, but we were right on the outskirts of some agricultural land. And so there were some horse farms nearby where I started riding. And eventually I started leasing a horse. And then I think by the time I was about 12, I got my own horse, and I competed a lot before that. Got into competing kind of at the national level and going to some championships in my preteens, and then definitely into teens. By 14, I was competing at the international level and starting to get into the young riders, and just kept progressing from there.
Wow. So what was the training like? Did you have a consistent, heavy schedule?
Yeah, it was my everything for sure. Before I was about 9 years old, it was once or twice a week riding lessons, and just going there, taking a lesson and going home. And by the time I was 9 or 10, I was spending long days at the barn, watching other people ride, being around friends, helping out with horses, helping out with barn chores, pretty much anything I could do to make it so that the barn owner would allow me to stay at the barn as long as possible. And then, yeah, by the time I was 10, 11, and into 12 and so on, really spending a lot of time, I was riding more days a week, and pretty much just living at the barn all the time.
Oh, commitment.
Yeah, it was a big commitment. Looking back on it,
Yeah.
at the time, it just was what I wanted to do. And it didn't feel like a commitment. It didn't feel like sacrifice. It felt like my biggest dream coming true. And looking back on it, I go, wow, that's like a dedicated little kid that would do all that.
Did you have any other athletes in your family?
One of my cousins, actually, she's younger than me by quite a bit, and she actually went to the World Equestrian Games in 2010 when they were in Lexington, Kentucky, on the vaulting team. And vaulting is when you lunge a horse in a circle, so it goes around, someone stands in the middle and has a horse on a big line, and they essentially do gymnastics on horseback. And so one of my cousins did that. I had another cousin who, she was pretty heavily involved in swimming. She competed all the way through the national level and was kind of recruited at the university level and probably could have gone on, but life just took her other ways and she had other interests, so she didn't pursue that. So there are some other athletes in the family.
All right. Thank you.
So when you were like younger, did you always imagine yourself going to the Olympics one day?
I dreamed about it a lot once I kind of figured out it was a thing. And in Canada, there's something called Spruce Meadows, which is a big horse show in Alberta. and it's aired on kind of your cable TV. So it's really common to watch. It's kind of the same. You can find it any weekend when they have a show, the same as you find a baseball game in the US. So I watched that a lot. And then from there, I kind of realized like those people were competing to then go on to try to be on the Olympic team. And it just was clearly the pinnacle of what you're trying to do. And so reaching for the top was kind of my ambition with horses. And that was defined as what the top was. So yeah, I did strive to get there. And then once I got competing more and got involved with the national team and got put on some long lists and short lists and got in training sessions, it just became very clear that that was the path that I was to work towards.
So once you actually got there, what was the actual experience of the opening ceremony like?
So it was neat. It was different than what a normal athlete would have because the equestrian events were in Hong Kong and the Olympic Games were in Beijing. And there's about 2,000 kilometers between the two. So they didn't ferry all the equestrian athletes up to Beijing for the Olympic Games. And the equestrian events, like they actually started the very next day. So it would be impossible. They did do an opening ceremonies for just the equestrian athletes. And you would pick one representative from the country and they would go on a stage. And so Ian Miller was competing for Canada, and Ian Miller, I think that was his 10th Olympics. And so he was the representative that went and stood on the stage for the Canadian equestrian athletes. And the rest of us just stood in these big grandstand stadium seats and watched the whole thing. And they live streamed and they did kind of a big show and had some musicians come in and that kind of thing. So it was a special night.
Yeah, that sounds amazing.
Yeah, it was very special.
Yeah. So obviously the road to international competition has to be scattered with disappointment. So, what was the biggest disappointment that you faced and how did you find the motivation to carry on?
I can't think of any one specific time. Like you said there, it's scattered with all kinds of ups and downs and disappointments. The general thing that's always the most disappointing is injury, because it really catches you at any moment, and it can catch you right when you think you're about to have a big breakthrough of something. You just get sidelined. And the human injury is obviously disappointing and frustrating and can obviously hurt sometimes, but I'd say it's even more disappointing when it's your equine partner. Like I said, it can really happen at any time. It always catches you off guard. It can happen at such an important moment that really derails your goals at the last minute, and that can be so disappointing. I love the horses so much and they're so dear that I'm disappointed about not being able to meet a goal that I've set when they get injured, but I'm even more disappointed just to see my equine partner hurt, because they really, it's such a personal relationship that it's just as much of a human, if not more, and you feel as strongly as about them. So seeing them hurt and sidelined, you just, even if they're going to be fine, and even if they're really not in any pain, you still just feel bad about the whole thing. So we have so many tools in veterinary medicine to help them that they normally heal perfectly fine, and we give them ample time and rehabilitation, but it's still just really disappointing.
Yeah. So I guess you really shared that, like those personal achievements with your animal, with your horse.
Oh, yes.
Yeah. So what is one of the greatest personal achievements that you and your partner have accomplished?
Well, so like looking at the horse that I took to the Olympics, and the biggest accomplishment with him, I'd say really like a lifetime with him, and just had the level of trust that is built between the horse and the rider, that you feel you get to a point with a horse when you've trained them and become such a partner, they trust you for anything. You can ask them to do you really can ask them to do anything at that point and they will do it for you. And that's where the human comes in, that you're given this major responsibility, that an animal has trusted you with everything that they are, and taking that responsibility with the weight that it deserves, and being able to do that, and I feel proud that I did do that with the horse I took to the Olympics. So that's something that I'm really proud and feel accomplished in.
Yeah, like along with your achievements, I mean, there's definitely like some mistakes that could happen. Like, what's one mistake that has happened in your career and how did you learn from it?
So one mistake, again, I can't think of one specific instant where this might have happened, but I could look back on times and think to myself that everyone strives to be really, when you strive to be really good at something and you kind of have a lot of ambition towards it, you're always trying to follow the motto of faster, higher, farther. And this can cause an athlete to be really hard on themselves. And that can sometimes kind of cause a bit of a psychological hardship. You know, any athletic endeavor is going to have a bit of a head game to it. And the best athletes aren't, and the best competitors aren't just the best athletes and the best trained. They're going to be the people that can keep their head on their shoulders and keep their head in the game really well. So one thing that I've learned is that we have to push ourselves and be the best that we can be. But we also have to be our biggest supporter and not our biggest critic. And that's one mistake that definitely I've made, and I think every athlete's made, is that you just get a little too hard on yourself. And if I can, and I try to do this to the people that I teach, is yeah, you got to push yourselves. Yeah, you got to be hard on yourselves, but you can't get too negative. And an athlete can always and should be honest with themselves in their critique, but they can't step into that territory of negative self-talk or getting down on themselves. So it's definitely a mistake that I've made, but I think it's also a journey that I've traveled and come out the other side of really well, that I am really good at being very critical of myself and being very honest about where my training is at. And if I make a little mistake in my training or my competition, very much acknowledging it and taking responsibility for it, but also handling it in a way that's going to be productive and not unproductive. And that's being positive about it still.
Yeah, that's really a great piece of advice. I mean, you kind of see that everywhere, whether it's athletics, academics.
Exactly.
And it definitely holds true. And it's so important to find that balance between really pushing yourself, but at the same time, you know, feeling that you can, you know, you have that support for yourself and you're not going too hard. You're not going too much over the
Exactly. You're pushing yourself and you're always trying to reach the highest tier on the ladder, but you're also compassionate to yourself and understanding to yourself, just as you would hope anyone else would be.
Yeah. Like the whole psychological aspect of like competing and like a lot of things in life, I think like no one really takes it into like consideration, but it's like one of them, like it's a really important factor, I think, in like competing and stuff.
Yep. It's totally, and it is one of, especially once you get to the highest level, like when you're at the Olympic Games, at least the top 20 athletes, if not more, they're all playing at the same game at that point. They can all ride the course just as well as each other. It really comes down to whose body feels the best in that moment, as far as the horse and the rider. Like, is one muscle cramping a little bit? So whose body has kind of been trained to the best of its ability to be at optimal performance, and who's got the best head game going on at that moment, who can stay focused, who can kind of get competitive, who can stay positive, who can react, all those things. That's even in, like, I think it's at least 20, if not more, of the top athletes at an Olympic Games. That's what the game is at that point. They can all jump the same height of jump. They can all do the same fancy dressage test. You know, it's really a head game at that point.
When you were there, did you see a, you know, horse and rider team that just really blew you away and really kind of stuck with you in terms of the dynamic?
Yep, absolutely. Yep, there were several pairs that really can stand out that we were there because Hong Kong's so far away. We shipped the horses well ahead of time. So we spent about 4 weeks in Hong Kong. And so there was a lot of training time prior to competition and lots of time to watch different people train. And that was hugely educational. That was a big instrumental point in my life of really gaining a lot of experience and knowledge.
All right. And so I guess when you kind of look at what you're doing now, what do you love most about it?
What do I love most? I love being able to work with horses every day and help other people learn to enjoy their horses more. I really like being outside, and I love that I get to spend the vast majority of my day outside in nature working with animals.
I know you've had like family and stuff who've been athletic, but have you had any like figures you looked up to along the way?
For sure. Yeah, there were a lot of people that inspired me throughout the years, and from the time I was young up until now. There's people that inspire anyone that is a professional athlete that's at the top of their game, to me, that's really inspiring, especially when they can be at the top of their game as an equestrian athlete and also be a wonderful horse person, because that's a balancing act too. We're asking animals to do something for us. And like I said before, that's a big responsibility that we've been handed, and we better take that responsibility with the weight that it deserves. So a professional that can do both of those things is really inspiring to me. And I think now, as I'm older, I still get inspired by those people. And I also get inspired by riding a talented horse. And if it has a lot of athletic potential, sometimes that horse kind of gives me the little extra inspiration to say, you know what, it is worth it. And try again, even if it's kind of easy to say, oh gosh, I don't know. Should I try to compete at a high level? Should I try to train this horse really well? And you sit on a horse and go, wow, this thing is just waiting to shine and I can help it. And that's really inspiring to me.
How many horses do you typically train at once?
So we have, my husband and I run a business together, and we have 23 stalls at our facility that are all horses in training. And it's split pretty much 50-50. So I'd say 11 or 12 horses in training here that I work with at my farm. And then there are students that come to me and they will bring their horses from another farm. They'll trailer in and they'll come train. So they ship in and I train them. And then I go to a few other places to train as well. So in a week, I would say I could train anywhere from, I don't know, depends on the week and depends on who I do, but anywhere from 30 to 75, I guess, would be a realistic number.
Oh.
Yeah.
That's a massive number.
Yeah,
So,
it's a lot.
So I guess you get to really, you kind of have to build that relationship with so many different horses and get to know
Exactly.
each one and their personalities. And so do you have to kind of alter or modify the way that you ride or treat each horse to kind of cater to their needs?
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Some of them I train daily, and I'm with them every single day of the week, and I see them and I touch them and work them. They don't work every day of the week. They typically work 5 days a week, but I work with them. And then some of them I might just see once a week, and then their owner rides them somewhere else. So any combination of that. And dealing with each horse as an individual is really critical. They're being a mom now and being a parent and raising children gives me even more insight to horse training, and horse training gives me insight into parenting. But each child is an individual and each horse is an individual, and you need to raise them and train them accordingly.
Oh, wow. But that sounds like some amazing experiences you get with, meeting.
It's really amazing.
Animal.
Yeah. Yeah, it's really amazing.
Well, anyway, thank you so much for joining us, Sam. And thank you to our listeners who tuned in. And make sure you tune in next month for another episode as Life is a